We are comparing how Foundry works between CachyOS and Windows 11. This is a Windows 11 side of that comparison. You can see the CPU temperature, which is in Celsius. You can see the CPU percentage. You can see the GPU temperature, which is in Celsius, the GPU percentage, the VRAM usage, the RAM usage, the FPS raw, the FPS on screen, and the latency. The FPS raw is when it goes into DWM, which is a scheduler and compositor. The FPS on screen is what you see visually on the screen. Those numbers may change. RAM, it's the system memory. VRAM is what your GPU has on it. Latency's 20 milliseconds. This is to give a good understanding of how the game runs. It may not have things like the 1% low, 0.01%, 0.1% low, I mean. But it's a good comparison between the two when you see them side by side. It's fairly smooth. I did see a slight micro stutter when I was first running around. It feels smooth. I'm not seeing any performance dips. However, it's stuck at 60 FPS, so I'm going to see if it's locked to 60 FPS. I just got. Okay, so it's locked to 60. Let's see if I can get it to 120. 120 is pretty much all you need. You can see how making that one adjustment brought the latency down from, I believe, 21 milliseconds down to 11 to 13 milliseconds. The FPS raw is sitting at 120. It fluctuates a little bit. But the latency helps measure the FPS because the higher the latency, the lower the FPS. $60 is like, it's around 22 for 60 FPS. That number may be slightly off, but it's within range of the actual number. 11, 12 FPS is 120. And as you can see, the game is handling well, so it's not pushing the device too hard. And I believe this is 4K. Let me go check the settings for graphics. Yup. 4K full screen, very far for terrain distance, high for the quality. So right there, that gives a good comparison for people with weaker systems who may run it on 1440p or 1080p. You should get similar performance to this with lower resolution, because playing games at a lower resolution reduces the bandwidth needed. At 4K, it's very demanding. As you can see, that my VRAM is 7.6 gigabytes out of 16 gigabytes, 24 gigs of system memory out of 64. So in that regard, at least the system memory is pushing fairly hard. I'm just running around to test certain areas to see if certain zones cause a performance dip. For example, right here, we're noticing it going from close to 120 to down to 80. So this is a visually demanding area. My GPU is at 100%. So it's maxed out. My CPU is at 12. However, I'm not seeing any performance issues. That means my GPU is the bottleneck, which is technically a better thing because with the graphics card being a bottleneck, it means I have more breathing room and my CPU is fine. If it was the other way around, then I would struggle more because the graphics card would be waiting for instructions from the CPU. Whereas this is the other way around. Or I should say, at least the game would be waiting for instructions and it could lead to more crashes. But we're out of that area that was hitting my GPU hard. And we're in a less intensive area. I am running a Ryzen 5950X, an RX 9070 XT, and 64 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. All my games are run on a separate drive than my operating system because if you leave them on the operating system drive, it will cause your drive to bottleneck the system due to having to run the OS and run the game files. And think of all that seek time that it would have to do. So that's one thing to focus on. Separate your game drive from your OS, and then if you end up recording video footage, have that footage recorded to a third drive. It will also help with editing. If you put your editing software on one drive, your video footage on a separate one, it will actually help balance out the load because your storage drives are typically the bottleneck, especially if they're SATA drives. NVMe, they can go either way. The ones that are the M2 drives. However, it's good to get used to separating your files from your OS drive. So if you have to reinstall your operating system, you can just reinstall your OS without having to worry about losing your data. And I will say this game is fairly good running on Windows performance wise. I'll have to make the other video CachyOS side, see how this compares, and I'll have them side by side. In this section of the video, we are going to see how Foundry runs on CachyOS, and we're comparing it to the other recorded section of the video that takes the Windows 11 side of things. We are comparing benchmarks. Both systems use a 9070 XT, an AMD 5950X, and 64 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. This system is running CachyOS 7.1.3-2. Both game versions are 0.6.02651.8-21433-02087. This is to ensure parity between as many variables as possible. We're looking at close to 100% CPU usage, 62 degrees Celsius, 3 gigahertz for the frequency on my graphics card, around 330 watts. We're running the VRAM at 9.2 gigabytes, 76 degrees Celsius on the VRAM chip module, 1258 megahertz on the VRAM module. The AMD 5950X is running at 12% CPU usage, 67 degrees Celsius roughly. We're running at around 4700 megahertz. The watts for the CPU is wrong. It should be higher. I believe it should be around 65 watts if I remember correctly. System memory is at 16.3 gigabytes. Running at 88 FPS, 11.4 milliseconds. For the current, the average is the same. We're looking at 78 FPS for the 1% low. It's hovering between 9 and 14 milliseconds for the frame rate or frame time, which is the latency. This is running Proton Experimental 11.0 hyphen 2026-0713, so it's a recent version of Proton Experimental. You try different compatibility layers to see if that will give you better performance, but that's the one that's used for this test. So with that, we're going to see how this game performs. I was reading the numbers from the menu screen. Now we're going to look at things running around my base just to see if there's a big swing in the performance or if it stays stable. The more stable the numbers, the smoother the experience. If you see major fluctuation, that's when you'll see a lot of potential stuttering and maybe the game will end up crashing. But the more stable it is with the numbers, you're going to see flawless and smoother performance. So if I go use that, you can see how it's moving in a smooth ring going outward until it disappears. That means there's no performance issues. If there are performance issues, you would see it hang up slightly, but for now, we are running fairly well. If I go to, like, say right here, as you can see, it basically destroyed it very quick. I put this on my... I can place it back down. It takes a minute, but it starts taking the coloring from the next spaces next to it. It's going to take a little bit before it fully recovers its biomass. But as you see, it's running very smoothly. The numbers are staying stable. And actually the minimum latency has gone down. It's down around 6.2 for the lowest end and 11.8 for the max. So we're seeing it work out better. The menu must have some latency issues, but as you see, it's running smooth. Looking around, I'm not seeing anything wrong. I guess that's the space station that sends stuff down, or it's been destroyed, one or the other. Maybe both. It might just be partially active. But as you see, everything's stable. And actually the VRAM went the right VRAM went down slightly, so did the regular RAM. Not by a whole bunch, maybe like 200 megahertz. Or 200 megabytes, I should say, for the usage. So that's something when you're doing, when you're playing games, especially for people who make content, because the worse your system is compared to what you truly want, you want to have more memory freed up to not cause issues with other applications. So for example, with this game, if I put all my system resources into the game, then OBS would suffer. If I ran a browser, that would suffer. And there's other applications. Some would be more towards the CPU side, others would be more towards the graphics card side. However, everything has a need for system resources, so you need to balance everything out. So if it means running the game at a slightly lower resolution than you truly want, then that might be the better call to ensure that you have a stable recording stream, or you can run other applications in the background. But with this game, running around 3 gigahertz for the graphics card, 1.2 gigahertz for the VRAM, which is video memory. Normal RAM, we're sitting at 16.4 gigabytes, which is the system memory. We're looking at 4.8 gigahertz for the CPU, which is very good for an AMD Ryzen 5950X. The usage on everything is technically close to where you want it. I mean, I would like to have a little less usage on my graphics card, but seeing that my graphics card's maxed out means that my CPU is not, and motherboard are not bottlenecking it. At least not to my knowledge. Now, if the PCIe lane happens to be a bottleneck, then that could be it, but most cases we're still not quite where we need to be to have to focus on PCIe Gen 5 or 6. Most graphics cards can handle PCIe Gen 4 and not get maxed out by